Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Living Room Lecture Series with Historic Locust Grove. We're so pleased to have you with us today. My name is Hannah Zimmerman, and I am the Marketing and Communications Director at Historic Locust Grove. And today we are joined by four wonderful panelists, Heather Hiner, Kaitlyn Tisdale, Crystian Wiltshire, and Sidney Edwards, who will be sharing with us the current history and interpretation of the enslaved at Locust Grove. The Living Room Lecture Series is made possible through sponsorships from PNC Bank and John and Jeannie Mizeau. So we're very grateful for the support of our sponsors. And just if you are joining us today for the first time, I'd just like to let you know how this is going to work. We're going to ask everyone to keep their microphones turned off for the duration of the program so we can keep the focus on our wonderful speakers. And if you have questions, you can ask them in the chat. We're having a conversation in the chat. And if you type anything in the chat, we just ask that you be courteous and considerate, respectful, and to stay on topic during our chat discussion today. Right now, we just want to know where you're watching from and how you found out about this program. You are also welcome to keep your video camera turned on. We like to see the faces of our audience, so please do feel free to keep your video off. Just keep your microphones turned on. I believe that our executive director, Carol Ely, has joined the call. Carol, are you here?
I am here.
Okay, I'm going to pin you to the screen, and Carol is going to say a few words. Take it away, Carol.
Great. I love being pinned to the screen. That sounds important. Welcome, everybody. So glad you could join us today. Just a few notes before we get to the main topic of today's talk. As many of you know, we are currently under construction. And this, in some ways, feels like we're really under the construction. It's a little shocking when you first come to the site and you see all the fencing and so forth, but it's all on the visitor center side of the building. The historic structures are not directly affected by this, and except that we will be providing better access to those structures at a point later this summer. There'll be some new paths and new interpretation appearing. So new facilities coming to Locust Grove. And this further complicates the already confusing process of reopening post-COVID. We're starting to tiptoe gradually into post-COVID age here. And we've got a lot of kind of hybrid events coming up where there's an in-person part of it, there's a virtual part of it. So please make sure if you're planning to join us for events that you're clear about how you can best participate. And we expect to be in this kind of in-between state for a while, not just because it's taking a while for everyone to get vaccinated, but also because we are under construction, as I think I mentioned. And that means that some of our facilities, like the auditorium, where we're used to hosting this lecture series, just aren't available right now. But things will, by 2022, be amazing. So stick with us. And today's program is particularly exciting because you can see some of the work that we've been doing for so long behind the scenes at Locust Grove. We've been developing partnerships, we've been doing research, all as part of a commitment to telling the stories of the 70s during the time that the Croghan owned the property. And we're working on telling their stories in a variety of ways. You'll hear about some of them today. It includes a new entire building exhibit as a dwelling house, recreated dwelling house of an enslaved family, through programs like this lecture, through publications, later exhibitions. Even in our programs like our chamber music series, we focused on Black composers. For the upcoming Jane Austen Festival, we're looking at race in a transatlantic setting. So these are questions that people are raising, that we're raising. How do we effectively tell these stories in a truthful and compassionate way so that people can start to take in parts of our history that we have preferred not to look at or have perhaps had to look at much too much. So we look forward to continuing these sorts of collaborations, and we welcome people who are watching this presentation to join us, get in touch with us. We'll slot you in wherever we can. So I don't want to take up any more of your time because you're going to hear from some really interesting people with some great things to say. So take it away, Hannah, unpin me. Hannah, you're muted.
Excuse me, I was testing my skills as a mime. Thank you, Carol. You've been unpinned. I have been unmuted. And I'm here to just once again remind you, I'm going to be dropping links in the chat so you can join our email list so that you can find out more about programs we're doing about the interpretation of the enslaved, both at Locust Grove in person, at Locust Grove virtually, and with other organizations virtually. We'll tell you a little bit more about that at the end of our program. But be watching the chat as well, and we'll send out an email with some of these links as well. Panelists, are you ready to be introduced? All right, just a reminder, keep your microphones turned off. Panelists, I will unpin you so you can, relax your faces while everyone else is speaking. But I'm so pleased to be able to introduce our distinguished panel to you today. We're going to start off with Sidney Edwards. Sidney Edwards is an actress, singer, dancer, and improv artist. She is currently an assistant professor and the director of the African American Theater program at the University of Louisville. Sidney received a BFA in musical theater in her home state of North Carolina from William Peace University in Raleigh. From there, Sidney went on to receive an MFA in theater and performance and a graduate certificate in African American theater from the University of Louisville in Louisville, Kentucky. Welcome, Sidney. All right, Crystian Wiltshire. Crystian Wiltshire is the museum theater director at historic Locust Grove.
About what this means, which is why it's not safe.
Crystian Wiltshire is the museum theater director at historic Locust Grove and works primarily with our interpreters who portray enslaved individuals on our site, among other projects. After graduating from the University of Louisville, Crystian has worked with arts organizations across the Commonwealth, including Kentucky Shakespeare, Stage One Family Theater, Looking for Lilith Theater Company, and Actors Theater of Louisville. He has also worked for several years in Cincinnati as a resident ensemble member of the Cincinnati Shakespeare Company, and Crystian has directed productions for the Cincinnati Shakespeare Company's touring company and Actors Theater of Louisville's apprentice program. Welcome, Crystian. Next up, Kaitlyn Tisdale. Kaitlyn Tisdale is a Louisville, Kentucky native who is the Director of Education and Family Programs at historic Locust Grove. Throughout her career, Kaitlyn has held positions at a variety of historic sites in Kentucky and Indiana, including the Culbertson Mansion, Ashland, the Henry Clay Estate, and Mammoth Cave National Park. Kaitlyn attended the University of Kentucky from 2008 to 2012, where she obtained her Bachelor's of Arts in History. She then attended Western Kentucky University from 2012 to 2014, where she received her master's degree in folk studies with an emphasis in historic preservation. Welcome, Kaitlyn. And finally, our first speaker today, Heather Hiner. Heather Hiner is a professional photographer who specializes in historic portraiture. Over the past 10 years, she has filled many roles as a volunteer at Locust Grove. Along with providing invaluable photography services at our events, she is a docent, the theatrical director of the First Person Interpreter Program, and she serves on the Volunteer Steering Committee, as well as the task force overseeing the research and implementation of programming involving the history of slavery at Locust Grove. Her biggest passion is research, and she spent the last 4 years focused on uncovering the life stories of the people who were enslaved at Locust Grove, allowing them to be shared more fully and more faithfully with the public. And now, Heather Hiner here to tell you about that process. Welcome, Heather.
Hello, everyone. I'm so excited everybody's here today. This is a topic that's very near and dear to my heart, and I'm very excited to share some of that with you. Let me get my screen share going here so you can see what I'm doing. And hopefully it will load. Are we loading? My screen may have froze. I'm sorry. Give me 1 second here to figure out why it's being.
That's okay. I'm just going to note that that photo you were seeing of Locust Grove was taken by Heather's husband, who is also a talented photographer. So photography and Locust Grove are very grateful for the Hiner's talents.
All right, my apologies. It's being.
Okay.
There we go. All right, you may just get to see my notes along with.
That's okay. It's great to see how our researcher's mind works.
There we go. Okay, I'm just going to leave it with my notes so that it's shareable.
Fantastic.
So, all right. So this here is Locust Grove, which many of you will be aware of. Sorry, let me move this window so I can actually see. There we go. All right, there's Locust Grove. Okay, so many of you may be familiar with the history of Locust Grove. For those of you who aren't, I'm just going to touch on a couple of points pretty quickly here. Locust Grove was the home of William and Lucy Croghan. William was an immigrant. He came here from Ireland at the age of 16. Current research indicates that he most likely came over with the military, and he served out his commission and was in the process of kind of apprenticing to be a merchant on the East Coast when the Revolutionary War broke out. And William chose to re-enlist this time though as a patriot and fought during the war. He married Lucy Clark from Virginia, and they built their home here at historic Locust Grove. Locust Grove was also the final home of General George Rogers Clark, who himself was also a Revolutionary War hero. He was also the founder of Louisville as well. And we usually, when we talk about historic homes, we think about who lived in the big pretty house, but Locust Grove was also the home of approximately 70 enslaved men, women, and children between the years of 1792 and 1856. Let me check my notes here. So in the past, Locust Grove has kind of had an interesting history in how slavery has chosen to be interpreted over the years. It became a museum in the 1960s, so right in the middle of the civil rights movement, at a time where racial tensions were particularly high. And like most Southern historic homes at the time, really chose not to address slavery head on. And there were many reasons that sites did that. It was uncomfortable, it was difficult, maybe there were racist undertones in management at some of the sites. There are many, many reasons why that happened. And Locust Grove's interpretation was pretty typical of the time. There was some research done about the people who were enslaved at Locust Grove during the 1980s and 1990s as well. And there were some very valuable records that were discovered during that time, which did broaden our knowledge of the lives of the enslaved people on the property. However, there was still a long way to go. The choice was made, again, this was very typical at the time, to refer to the people who were enslaved as servants. Was the term that was used in most historic museums in the South, which was acknowledging a presence of a workforce there, but not really acknowledging the condition in which these people lived and labored. And so as things evolved and we continue to move forward and do better, Locust Grove has pushed to be much more transparent about the stories and the lives of the people who labored on this property. And so the most recent push for research and interpretation at Locust Grove began about 4 or 5 years ago, where we really started focusing in on finding more documentation. And one of the challenges that was discovered was that we had all these letters written by the Clark and Croghan family members, but they hadn't been always transcribed fully. And so sometimes references to enslaved people were left out of the transcriptions that we had. So it really turned out that we had more information than we even realized that we had at the beginning. And so That was addressed. The letters were retranscribed. That gave us some new information, which was really helpful. And then, you know, one of the first things that I did is I started researching the enslaved people, was to look at what do we have, going through all the family letters or documents that we have, and then comparing them against, cross-referencing them against each other. And in some cases, we found out that we knew more about some people than we had realized, but we had never really laid out all the information in order to be able to make those connections. And the next step then was to find other sources, census records, court documents, newspaper accounts, journal accounts, especially like in the case of the people who were enslaved at Mammoth Cave, which was owned by Dr. John Croghan. You know, visitors in Mammoth Cave, their diaries and letters became very valuable in gathering details of who these people were and what their lives were like. So this here is one of my favorite things at Locust Grove, and it's actually a close-up of the house. And in 1792, there were 17 men who were enslaved by William Croghan who lived on the property, and they would have cleared the land and built the home. And as a result of that, the house is actually the largest artifact that we have from the enslaved people who lived on the property. They would have dug out the basement of the home and used that clay in the soil to make bricks that would then become the outside structure of the home. And we believe that there are approximately 150,000 bricks in the house. It took them about 3 years to make those bricks. So about 50,000 bricks a year. And if you can look in the center of this picture, you can see that's actually 2 fingerprints on one of the bricks on the front of the home at Locust Grove. And this set of fingerprints was discovered by Joe McGill of the Slave Dwelling Project when he came to Locust 2 years ago now. The pandemic has me all wonky in my timeline, but when Joe came and visited us, and this is one of 3 or 4 sets of fingerprints that we have now found in the bricks. So the enslaved people have literally left their mark on this home by when you study the bricks. And I'm going to go to the next page here. One of the interesting things about the enslaved people at Locust Grove too is that, you know, in Kentucky, slavery did not always take the stereotypical form we think of enslaved people laboring in fields and bringing in large crops that you could sell for a profit. You know, in Kentucky, most of the relationships with slavery were more urban. And so there were different relationships between those who were enslaved and the enslavers. And one example with Locust Grove is at this point in time, we have yet to locate any records that indicate that there was a white overseer on the property. And based on the letters that we have from the Croghan family, it's pretty apparent that the Croghans were working quite closely with the people they enslaved, which then begins to create a different relationship when there's not a middleman who is organizing that labor. And so because of that, it can sometimes give us a more unique glimpse into the relationships between the Croghans and the enslaved people who lived there on the property. By the height of the farm, I talked about how in 1792, we had 17 enslaved men and women. By the height of the farm, there were at least 48 people on site at one time. And then over the course of the property, about the time the Croghans owned the property, about 70 people that we know of now that were enslaved. So this picture that you're looking at here is actually the remains of the foundation of one of the enslaved dwellings at Locust Grove. There are no original dwellings still standing on the property. There are 3 foundations that we know of for sure. 2 of them are out in a large field near the house, and this one is back in the woods. There are 2 other potential sites that are no longer on Locust Grove property. but those would be where the mill that William Croghan owned stood, and the ferry that he owned that went out to 6 Mile Island on the Ohio River. We know there were enslaved families who lived near those structures, and so there are probably remains of foundations in those areas as well. But much like, this is a great example of how, much like the records of the Croghans, or the structures of the Croghans, the Croghan home has been preserved so beautifully, whereas the slave dwellings have not. That very much mimics the search for information on these people. The Croghan letters have been, relatively easier to discover, to find, and to learn about what their lives were like. It's been a much larger labor to uncover the history of the enslaved people who lived at Locust Grove. Right here, this is a list I have of, this is the approximately 70 people that we know by name who were enslaved by the Croghan family during the time that they owned Locust Grove. These people would have lived at Locust Grove, potentially at one of the homes the Croghan family owned in Louisville, and also at Mammoth Cave. The oldest son of William and Lucy Croghan, Dr. John Croghan, owned Mammoth Cave for a while, and he enslaved, I should say, 2 men, Stephen Bishop and Alfred Croghan, and he leased 2 other men, Matterson Bransford and Nicholas Bransford, to work at the cave and to serve as guides for guests who came. So they are also included in this list. And lastly, it's so hard to put this in 15 minutes because I can talk for an hour. I'm gonna segue to Sidney a little bit, who's gonna talk more about actually interpreting the enslaved at Locust Grove. But I wanted to share this picture here on the left. This is the structure that is becoming our new interpretation of an enslaved dwelling at Locust Grove. And I'm very excited for guests to be able to see all the amazing research and love that has been put into this site, to be able to share these stories in a new hands-on way. And while this cabin will be a place where we can talk about not only the lives of the people at Locust Grove, but also about slavery in general, slavery in Kentucky, and slavery against a larger national conversation as well. So it's intended to have a broad appeal and the ability to host many different kinds of conversations. However, it will also be viewed as representing the house of a woman named Louisa Brown, who was enslaved at Locust Grove. And this picture on the right is actually a man named Jim Brown. And he is the son of Louisa and Charles Brown. And he was born at Locust Grove and was able to procure his freedom as a child, and then lived out his life near Mammoth Cave the rest of his life. But this is one of the few photographs we have of people who were enslaved at Locust Grove. And with that, I think I'm gonna stop my share and hand it off to Sidney.
Thank you, Heather. Take it away, Sidney.
All right. Hi, everyone. I just want to preface with, I am in Old Louisville, so if you hear the planes flying by, that's a thing. And also everybody's working from home today, but I'm very excited to be with you and to be able to share a little bit about my experience. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about the program that I'm the director of, the African American Theater Program at the University of Louisville, about our relationship with Locust Grove, and about my personal story with Locust Grove and how I came to be a part of the LG family. So I am Sidney Edwards, and I am the director of the African American Theater Program, which is housed in the theater department at the University of Louisville. We're about 28 years old, founded in 1993. And what makes us special is that we're the first and still the only accredited graduate program in African American theater in the nation. Our program offers a very unique opportunity for students to study African American theater, and they can earn either a graduate certificate in African American theater, like I did, or an undergraduate minor in Black Performance Studies. We offer a very in-depth curriculum that focuses on theory and craft and acting and directing and designing for Black theater. So our students are learning about history and literature and Black aesthetics that make African American theater so rich and culturally essential to our society. In a typical year, the AATP is committed to staging 2 works by Black dramatists. This year, as you can imagine, it was very different with all of the COVID restrictions, but we were still able to put out a couple of virtual projects, one in which I'm directing right now, and I'll be available in April. So when I'm finished speaking, I'm going to post a link to our website so you can check out what we do and what we're about.
I have posted a link in the chat.
Thank you, Hannah. Super duper. So a little bit about our connections. So our current partnership is actually pretty strong, and I'm very excited about it. I've got 2 graduate students that are currently starting in the internship program there. Crystian Wiltshire is a U of L theater alum, and he is now on the LG team running this interpretation project. And I am still a part of it. Former classmates of mine are still part of it. It's a really great thing. But it didn't start as big as it is now. There weren't that many people involved. In fact, I am the very first interpreter of the current iteration of this program. So I came on when I was in graduate school, and I did need an internship to fulfill my requirements for the graduate certificate in African American theater. And I believe Brian Cushing, who was the program director at the time, reached out to our chair, Nefertiti Burton, and they were looking for people. I think this was like around my 2nd year grad school. And there were several, and they were particularly looking for Black women. I remember that. And there were several Black women in the department at the time, but nobody was very interested in it for the reasons you might think, right? It's a very touchy subject. It's not a history that people are comfortable going back to or even exploring, right? As Heather talked about. I come from a family that is very into our history. We're very into our genealogy and knowing our history and knowing our roots. So it was something that lined up with my interest and with my skill set as well. So it was an opportunity to try acting in a new realm, as it were. You know, up to that point, especially a lot of students, acting is you get a script and you learn the lines and then you do it. But I also came from an improv background. If anybody's ever seen improv comedy, or I'm really good at making things up on the spot. That's kind of my jam. So I was really interested in how I could take that skill and flip it into something new. And I think it's also really important. I don't think that Carol would mind me saying this, but I think it's actually very commendable that Locust Grove, I'll call it LG, you know, it's in my heart. Locust Grove, the internship that they have for this Enslaved program is a paid internship, right? I think it's very commendable that we're not asking people to do this kind of emotional labor and digging into their own history for free. And I think that's very commendable. And I was very excited about that, and I'm excited that it continues to be that. But still a scary thing when you're getting started and when you're literally the only person to start on. You're like, okay, I don't really know what I'm getting myself into, but here I go, right? Lucky for me, and no surprise to all of you, I'm sure, Locust Grove is a very supportive team. And they were very supportive. In one, they were excited that I was there, and they were supportive of my research and digging into the performance and finding costumes and finding a character and building a story. So the internship program, the way we kind of built it, it's got several different parts. It kind of lasts for about a year, but you spend the entire first part of this internship researching. So you're learning about history in Kentucky. You're learning about the Croghan and historic Locust Grove. And again, we do not know a ton, right, about the people that were enslaved there, especially women. We tend to know more about, you know, Alfred Croghan and Mr. Bishop, that kind of thing. We have like names of women, and they're like small attributes that are attributed to them. So when I was trying to pick a character to interpret, there was this one woman up there named Rose, and it said Rose something 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 is very lazy, right? And I remember we kind of all looked at that, and Brian Cushing and A.B. Liebert, who I adore as well, and we were thinking about basically perception, right? So while the person that wrote this ledger and wrote this note about Rose is perceiving her as lazy, perhaps she is finding resistance in her own way. And that's what drew me to this particular character, as it were. And I imagine, even though I wasn't there, that people were finding small ways to resist all the time, right? So what happens is when you don't have a ton of information, you have like little snippets here, you kind of wind up building what they call a composite character, which is a mix of was a real person with a real name and they were really here. We don't know a lot about them, but we can interpret them. We can build a character around them based on the research of the things that we do know was happening around them. So it's a mix of the fact and the imagination together, right? But with reverence and with tact. So I started interpreting, interestingly enough, in third person. One, I wasn't really comfortable, right, yet. And two, people weren't used to seeing somebody that looked like me on the property. So I got a lot of questions about Sidney, the actress, right? And not necessarily Rose, the character. And that's kind of where we had to start. People just kind of had to get used to seeing me around. And it was okay because it was actually a way for me to ease into it as well. I was like, yeah, I'm here. I'm a student and I'm trying this thing out. And people were like, cool. All right. The tricky thing, one of those interactions were okay. Some of the trickier interactions came when I was interpreting with people that were interpreting family members. And at that point, we hadn't had a lot of rehearsal yet. We were kind of winging it. We were improvising it. And so we weren't exactly sure how to interact with each other in the space, right? And so more or less what would happen is the people would come and they would interact with each other, right? The people that were interpreting the house would interact with each other and they would interact with the crowd and they would kind of ignore me, right? And it was like we don't really know what to say yet, but in a lot of ways, I feel like that could have been true to the time as well, right? Because Black people were essentially invisible. We didn't have people weren't looking for us. We were not important. So it still kind of worked. As we went on and as we continue to go on, I'm hoping that we'll have even more like conversations with both groups of interpreters, the volunteers and the Enslaved Interpretation program. So we can continue to like delve into these relationships. I will say that one of the things I did enjoy about it, after a while, some more people started to come on and I got to interact with other people playing enslaved people. And that's when my character really started to come alive because they were in a space where they were comfortable talking and being candid. And then letting the audience, the patrons kind of in on that. So that was very interesting. I started my particular journey. And I think one of the great things is we kind of framed the interpretation project around the different skills and the different things that people would have been doing at the time. So I got started in the distillery. Brian Cushing taught me all about this distillery and, you know, making the whiskey, and it was really exciting. And so talking to people and interpreting around those skills, you're less focused on, at least at first, you're less focused on like my actual presence and you're more focused on what I'm doing. And then I'm able to kind of like sneak that into the conversation about, you know, hey, I'm actually here, right? My favorite people to interpret for are always the school programs. I love the children because they are always so willing to suspend their disbelief. And as somebody who has done like a ton of children's theater, it's my favorite thing. And for a lot of them, it's their first time being introduced to this idea of slavery and enslaved people. And so I explained to them, like, hey, you know, my life is not my own. I don't have the rights to kind of go where I want. I have to do what these people say I have to do, right? I have to explain it to them, and to see those light bulbs go off. And a lot of them were like, oh no, that's not right. That's bad. I'm like, yeah, that's bad. So being their first introduction to that, it's very special to me, because they need to know these things, and they might not have ever known those things if they didn't come to visit us, if they didn't have a very special teacher that was adamant about bringing them to Locust Grove, right? And the fact that we can be that spot where that happens, where people are introduced to not just one side of history, but all of our history, is so important. And I'm excited that we are continuing to delve into that, and all of the new projects that we have going on that are making this story better, telling our stories. I think for me personally, it's really important, because if we don't tell these stories, right, if we don't show up to these sites, if we're not there, then we're essentially erased from that history, right? People will try to act like it never happened. And the thing is, all of those things that happened are still affecting us today, right? Today. You know, and that's what people need to realize. We need to go back and see our history and see what we've been through and see what that was, so that we can make now better. That's what I really believe. Let me see. I wanted to make sure I didn't miss anything in my notes. I took notes, y'all. Oh, and some of the other things, places I was able to interpret. So I started at the distillery. I moved to the kitchen, which is my favorite thing. I love cooking in the hearth kitchen. It's my absolute favorite thing. And I got to do it for school days. I got to do it for Christmastide, which is really special. And that's a really interesting juxtaposition, right? So people are in this house and they're like, oh, Christmas time in the house. And then they come out and they see us cooking in the kitchen, or they see all the labor that's really happening behind the scenes. And it helps put things in perspective for people. The same thing happened when I interpreted for July 4th, right? I'm there on July 4th, my presence is there, and people are realizing, oh yeah, this didn't really apply to everybody at the time. Or I'm interpreting in the house for, I believe it was it George Rogers Clark's funeral, Heather? I can't remember. Yes, George Rogers Clark's funeral. And people are like in and out of the house, and I actually was interpreting with another person at that time. So we had that relationship. But then people were ushered out to the house, to like the funeral site. And I think the guy, he was able to go out, but I had to stay back, right? And watch from the window, and people could see me there. And it is more often than not, I don't have to say anything for people to get the point, right? My presence there says a lot, and I am present and I am there. I also want to say, as I wrap up my little notes, I'm sorry if I'm going over, Hannah. Okay. That more often that I really want to say that Locust Grove has just been a huge community for me, and a community builder. I remember when I went there, it felt a lot like when I started in theater, and community theater, and people that are just there because this is something that they enjoy doing. It's in a story that they enjoy telling and that they know is important. It's important work. I've always felt extremely supported there. I got to meet some really cool people there, like Michael Twitty, who is the foremost expert on enslaved cuisine. He has one of my favorite quotes, which is, our ancestors came over here empty-handed, not empty-headed, and that has always stuck with me. It was an amazing experience getting to cook with him. We wound up on Bizarre Foods. We wound up on Andrew Zimmern's Bizarre Foods, and I'm up there eating fried chicken. It's crazy. And I also met Joy Carew, who was a board member at the time, who wound up being a member of my thesis committee. So really, all the connections that I've been able to make there have really fed me as an artist, as a historian in my own right. And I'm excited for Locust Grove and all of the things that we are building and doing here. So I'll wrap up there, because I feel like that kind of segues into the next person with what's gonna happen now. All right. Thank you for letting me speak today.
Thank you so much, Sidney. And now I'd like to introduce our museum theater director, Crystian Wiltshire. Take it away, Crystian.
Thanks, Hannah. Thank you, Sidney. Wow, I'm really glad to be going third, because I think everyone got a really nice sort of breakdown of the history of Locust Grove in regards to the enslaved that were on the site. And then you just got a really nice foundation from Sidney of how it is to interpret the enslaved from a performance perspective. And now here I am to get to talk about all the exciting things that I get to do now. The reason that I joined Locust Grove in the first place, let me just say real quick, is because of Sidney. She put a Facebook post online and said, "Hey, is anyone interested in an arts admin job?" And so I messaged her and was like, "Yeah, absolutely. I'm really trying to get more experience, not just as an actor on the stage, but pick up some things that are off the stage, behind the scenes work." And she said, that this job was available at Locust Grove, and I reached out, and here I am, and I'm just really grateful to be here. And so thank you, Sidney. You're the best. So yeah, as of now, like Sidney was just saying, there's a real importance to the work of interpreting the enslaved. And so Louisville Tourism has this program called the Unfiltered Truth Collection, which is a number of museums and different sites around the city are coming up with shows to highlight the lives of the enslaved and how the enslaved had an impact on this city. And Locust Grove, we have a show that is called Unfolding the Story, which is a guided tour from the perspective of two enslaved people at the site. One of them is Alfred, and it's Alfred Croghan, who, as you heard earlier from Heather, was someone that was actually at the site. The other character is Louisa, but she is more of a composite character that Sidney was telling y'all about earlier. But Alfred, that character is inspired from the real Alfred Croghan. I don't know if y'all have been to Locust Grove yet, and you've done some of the guided tours that are already going on there, and they're great. They're really informative. But this takes that idea of a guided tour and puts a spin on it. And so, yes, you're an audience member that is, going on this tour, but we actually put you in the show, and you are actually a deliverer of items, whether it be sugar or saltpeter or different potteries or paper. Things that you are dropping off to the house as Louisa and Alfred are taking you through different spots of the house and in the outbuildings and eventually to the distillery and the enslaved dwelling. It's a really, I think, powerful story. It started out as a script that was put together with Louisville Tourism and some of our folks on our staff. And when I was hired, they were kind enough to say, "Crystian, feel free to look at the script and do any sort of editing that you think would be better to make the show that much better." And also, if we're just going to be honest about it, I'm a Black man. And so they at Locust Grove said, "You know what, maybe it'd be nice to get a Black perspective on this script. If we're going to have Black performers putting on this show, let's really try to give them as much agency as possible over this story, because it is important to give the performers, the designers, everyone that is a part of the show, that agency as they tell this really, really meaningful show." So we're looking forward to that. We're hoping for our first public performance to be April 17th, but COVID and vaccinations and things, time will tell about that. But just, look out for more information regarding that. But it really is a really beautiful show to be a part of, helping craft, and it's an immersive theater experience that I think is really important. Along with that job of putting this show up, I've also been given the chance to come up with other ideas that might be related to the mission of Locust Grove of telling more stories of the enslaved. So my passion, one of the as an actor, is Shakespeare. I love Shakespeare. It's, as Hannah said earlier, I work with Cincinnati Shakespeare Company. I've worked with Kentucky Shakespeare in the past, and I've been really thinking about ways to show that the enslaved may have learned about Shakespeare as well. And so I heard a podcast not too long ago that was talking about the history of Shakespeare and African Americans. And, of course, they talked about Ira Aldridge and a lot of pretty popular Black performers in the past, but they went back to slavery time and how, yes, Shakespeare can be read, but it is meant to be heard. It is meant to be performed. So they talked about different scenarios of like different enslaved people maybe being outside in a hallway while Shakespeare was being read inside of a room, or being at a performance of some sort. And maybe they can't necessarily go inside where the Shakespeare is being performed, but they can always hear it. So different lines of Shakespeare, like, my outcast state and things like that, that those lines that they hear still mean something to them, although at the time, because of the conditions that they lived in, they might not have been able to read and write. So it still has an impact. So that's something that's going to be a real passion project of mine, is finding a way to incorporate Shakespeare and put that in the hands of really talented historic interpreters on the site. I'm looking forward to that. And then, as Sidney mentioned earlier, in regards to July 4th, we were just talking the other day about this idea of having the Declaration of Independence read while also having Frederick Douglass's "What to the American Slave is the 4th of July" speech read, kind of splicing or merging, I should say, the two speeches together in a fun, interesting way that might make us hear both popular speeches or words in a different way. So that's something that that we're all working on right now. What else? I think that's about it for me right now. I'm just really, really happy to be here, and looking forward to coming up with more fun ideas, more engaging ideas to continue to highlight the stories of the enslaved at Locust Grove. And yeah.
Thank you so much, Crystian. If you have questions for any of our panelists, including Crystian, we are going to be asking those in just a few minutes. But right now, we will turn it over to our Director of Education and Family Programs, Kaitlyn Tisdale. Take it away, Kaitlyn.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's been such a treat to listen to my colleagues here talk about all the great work that we've been done. I'm going to get my screen share set up so you can see a little bit more of what we've been doing. All right, how's that look, guys? Good? All right, cool. So I'm going to talk today about our current projects and initiatives. I'm going to bring back some of what you've heard Sidney and Heather and Crystian touch on today just a little bit. And again, if you have any questions, leave those in the chat. We'll be so happy to answer those at the end. So you'll see here, one of our partnerships that we have mentioned previously is having Michael Twitty here on site. He is an author, he is a culinary historian, he's an interpreter, and he really brought a new level of an experience to Locust Grove when he visited in May of 2018. He was here for an entire week-long residency, and during this time he explored the influence of African culture and African food in the enslaved experience here in America. Now, his events demonstrated his dedication as a researcher and his commitment to preserving and promoting African American foodways and culture, which is critical in this work. So having him here was really an unparalleled experience. He does have a book. You can buy that in the museum store here. He has an incredible blog. His book is called The Cooking Gene, and in that book, he really traces his ancestry from Africa to America and from slavery to freedom. It was released in 2017, I believe, and it's really an incredible read. I also really encourage everyone to check out his blog as well. It's called Afro Culinaria, and he has some really insightful articles on that blog as well. So we learned quite a bit from him, And we actually hope to host him again for either an in-person experience if we can, or as always, we have discovered how to put on a pretty good virtual experience as well. So please look forward to seeing him back with us in future. Another one of our partners is Andrea Meriwether. We have such a great time working with her. She's such a joy, and you can really see in her picture on the right there, she's actually standing in front of the distillery here on site. That is her presence. She exudes such joy. She is actually a bourbon consultant and curator, and she is the owner of Bar Fair Concepts here in Louisville, Kentucky. She's been a great partner and collaborator with our farm distillery project. She's helped us do research and interpretation of the distillery, and she will be partnering with us on a couple more things here in the future. Her career has seen her tend bar at the famed Pendennis Club to now developing her own sold out experiences throughout the region. So look for more great things to come with her. Another one that you've heard mentioned by Heather earlier was Joe McGill and the Slave Dwelling Project. Joe McGill is a history consultant with Magnolia Plantation in Charleston, South Carolina, and is the founder and director of the Slave Dwelling Project. And the Slave Dwelling Project's mission is to raise awareness and organize resources to preserve, interpret, maintain, and sustain all the existing slave dwellings and other enslaved structures here in the United States. So far, Joe has reached over 90 sites in over 18 different states and engages with diverse audiences at each one of those sites. So he has made a significant impact in this research and in this community. Joe last was at Locust Grove in August of 2019. And we had a wonderful event with him here on site, an incredible attendance, and it really inspired a lot of conversation, a lot of reflection and transformation. So having him here, having him help us locate these fingerprints that you see in the brick of Locust Grove really anchored a lot of what we've been trying to do. And it gave us a new sense of inspiration and direction. So Crystian has already mentioned our work on the Unfolding the Story project. This came about right around a year ago, March of 2020, when things were getting a little bit crazy with the pandemic. Hannah and I started working with Louisville Tourism on developing an experience. And it started out as words on a Microsoft Word document, and with the help of our actors and Crystian and Sidney and our Enslaved task force, it has truly become something that we are very excited to unveil to the public. This is one of our actresses. Her name is Patty Crawford. Here you'll see her as her character, Louisa, the laundress. You'll also see our actor X. He's a student, or he actually just graduated recently from U of L's African American Theater program. And here he is in character as Alfred, working in the distillery. So these are just some glimpses of what's to come for these experiences. Also, some behind the scenes look. I thought you all might like to see during the pandemic, masks and all, we were still working in the house. We were recording pieces of this experience to be able to share that with others in a safe way. So work has not stopped at Locust Grove in the past year. Another thing that we have been really working hard on during the pandemic and the public closure was truly transforming the former wood shop, the building that you see here, and turning that into an enslaved family dwelling, a dedicated space of reflection and education and commitment to telling the stories of the enslaved individuals, men, women, and children here at Locust Grove. Now, you'll see the inside right now. It is definitely an in-progress look. Could you believe, if you had seen this before, this was a wood shop filled with over 500 individual pieces. and artifacts in this one space. So it's taken quite a bit of work. Thank you to our groundskeeper, Jeffrey. Thank you to our volunteers that have helped us clean this building out. And we have been working on rededicating this space for hopefully many, many years to come. Like I said, it's been a year-long project at this point, and our goal is that this space can be used and touched and experienced in a different way than all of the other structures on site. We want this to be a place where school groups can come and ask questions, and where we can, like Sidney said, be the start of how children learn about the enslaved communities here in the United States. Speaking of that, I did see a question in the Q&A that we will touch on in a little bit, but it was a question about how to engage children in this conversation of teaching them about slavery. There was a great program put on by Cheney McKnight of her Instagram and Facebook handles are Not Your Mama's History. She's fabulous and has some great work. And she really has started to pave the way for having these conversations with children and youth across the country. The main question is, don't be afraid. Ask them questions, meet them where they are, see what they already know, and build on it in the correct way. So it's asking questions, and it's covering terminology that over the past 5-10 years has slowly been changing to more appropriate terms. So rather than using the word slave here on site, our staff and volunteers are committed to using the word enslaved individual. Slavery is a condition put upon them rather than who they are. And so we want to give them back their agency. We use the term enslaver rather than master or slave owner. We use the words freedom seeker rather than runaway slave. Again, we are giving these people back their dignity, their agency, their individuality. And that's something that's really critical in teaching children and letting them know the true history behind this. So we also want to show maps. We want to show how widely the system of slavery spread. We want to make local connections. I could go on and on about this. So if we have more questions in the chat, I'm happy to answer them at the end. Otherwise, I will use all my time. Another project that we've been working on is really unveiling our distillery programming. This was going to be a huge effort in 2020, and we all know how 2020 went. So keep looking at our Facebook, our website, all of our different social media pages. We will be hosting more farm distillery days on site in the near future. And this is how we interpret a small farm scale distilling project in early Kentucky. So this is before mass production of bourbon truly begins. And so the alcohol that was distilled here on site is actually kind of what we call pre-bourbon. This is more of what we would consider a white dog bourbon. And so at our distillery events, you will learn how whiskey is made from grain to still, and how distilling was one of the best ways to preserve excess crops. I'm going to do a brief plug here, so Hannah will love me for this. We are actually going to have a event on Thursday evening called the Punch Bowl. We're going to have some special guests from Scotland and Ireland, where we'll actually talk a lot about distilling in this time period. So if you're interested in more information on historic distilling, visit the Punch Bowl on Thursday evening. That will be on Zoom as well. So Heather has touched on research, so I won't go too far into this, but our research is always continuous and ongoing. This is the historical research. This is genealogical research. We are making connections from the enslaved people that were here on site during the Croghan era, and we are finding their descendants. So we have succeeded in some of these lines. We are still working on that. We want to really form a descendant community here at Locust Grove. We want them to be able to know what we're doing, to have input in what we're doing, and to be a part of our community. We also have a lot of archaeological research. So you'll see there's a spoon in the photograph there on the screen that has an X marked through it. So it was not uncommon for old utensils and old chipped china, anything like that, to be given as cast-offs to the enslaved community on site. And so that's an item that was found here. We have whole hordes of archaeological findings and artifacts found here on site. So we are dedicated to keeping this research ongoing. You can see the list of enslaved individuals. That was a register kept, of course, during the Croghan era, but now we have over 70 names from the research that has been done just in the past decade. So that's pretty incredible. So that brings me to our Named Enslaved campaign. This is something that we started doing very early in 2020. We wanted to bring these names to life. We wanted to share the information that we've been collecting and we've been finding with everyone. So we have been posting weekly on our social media pages the names and brief biographies of the known individuals on site. That is not to say that we don't honor and appreciate all of the unknown individuals that we have yet to discover. So that is ongoing work that we are thrilled to continue to share with our community. Lastly, I wanted to just let you know, if you support what we are doing, if you appreciate this work and you want to give to Locust Grove, there is the link on the screen. Hannah's going to put it in the chat. A great way to help support Locust Grove in our work right now is to help give. This will go to helping us pay actors for the Unfolding the Story experience. It will help furnish the slave dwelling project that we've been doing. So there are a lot of different ways to give, and we appreciate your attending today. We appreciate you being a part of this with us. And as Hannah has said, as I've said, if you have any questions, pop those in the chat and we'll be happy to answer them for Q&A.
Whoops. All right. Well, thank you, Kaitlyn, and the rest of our panelists. I'm going to re-pin you now, so don't be surprised when your face gets big. There it is. All right. I'm going to pin myself so I'm not a disembodied talking head. Hello. Thank you to our panelists. We're so grateful to all of you for your great information and your enthusiasm for for sharing the stories of the enslaved. Kaitlyn did briefly mention that we continue to work with the Slave Dwelling Project and Joe McGill, and I put some information in the chat, but I will just let you know, as you are typing questions for our panelists in the chat, I do have some from Brad, Dana, and Stephanie already, but if you have other questions, you can go ahead and put those in the chat and we will answer them. We still partner with the Slave Dwelling Project along with 3 other Louisville historic houses: the Oxmoor Farm Foundation, Farmington Historic Plantation, and Riverside, the Farnsley Mormon Landing. Along with Locust Grove, these 4 historic sites are former sites of enslavement, and we have formed the Louisville Coalition for the Interpretation of Slavery. And as part of this, we hope to be able to welcome Joe McGill back to Louisville later this year or early next. But until then, we're hosting a series of virtual programs. And our next virtual program is on April 8th at 6:30 p.m. I'll drop this in the chat. It will also be in your follow-up email today or tomorrow. But this program will focus on the interpretation of the enslaved. So it will feature Heather Hiner, who you spoke with today. It will feature Lori Stahlgren, one of our archaeologists who's worked at all of these sites. It will feature a descendant of, I believe, the Oxmoor, or no, the Farmington community. And we will also be joined by Cheney McKnight of Not Your Mama's History. I do want to reiterate what our executive director, Carol, has said in the chat. She is so proud of the work being done by Heather, Sidney, Kaitlyn, Crystian, our actors, former staff member Brian Cushing, who's still working with the distillery projects. It is just great to know that we have a team like the people whose 4 faces are on your screen. I'm just grateful that they let me tell all of you about it and they agree to come on a lecture and tell you everything that they're doing. So with that in mind, panelists, are you ready for some discussion questions? Okay. From Brad, when Heather was speaking, I noticed that she corrected herself when initially referring to a particular person as owned, and then she said enslaved. Is it now considered not proper to use the term owned? And what other changes or expectations do we have around language when talking about the enslaved right now?
All right. That's a great question. And yeah, I did catch myself. Language is definitely something that is evolving and sometimes quite rapidly. So what the current concern is to make sure that we are acknowledging the humanity of these people who were living in really horrific circumstances. And by basically using what we would call person first language, we're acknowledging the person who is in a condition. And so like Kaitlyn was saying earlier, you know, a person is, you know, we tend to avoid using the word slave to describe someone because that's not the totality of who that person was, but they lived in a condition of enslavement. And so a group of people who had very little agency, very little free will or direction, you know, in their life, it's a way to give a little bit of that back to them. And so by the same token, owner, you know, do we really own a person? You know, that idea of ownership of a person, you know, someone may say they own another person, but ultimately, do you have the right to own someone? They enslave them. You know, you own a pet, you enslave a person. And so it's really about just trying to give as much agency as possible. And like when I was talking and I did slip up, a lot of times that will happen because when I am quoting an actual like primary source, an actual letter or a census or a slave schedule, I use the language that was written at the time because I want to make sure that I am, you know, being accurate to the history of it. But when I'm generally talking about someone, you know, I try to use more respectful language. So every now and then I will slip up and kind of catch myself.
Mm-hmm.
And Heather, is it safe to say that this sort of transition with the language and how we, you know, describe people that were enslaved, is this happening across the country?
Mhm.
I would say so. I think we saw it kind of first more in circles of like historians and researchers of academics, you know, using that kind of language. But it has certainly been catching on into you know, a broader array of people. It's some people feel it's a little controversial. Some people are like, you know, they were a slave and you should call them a slave. It was a horrible thing and we need to, you know, acknowledge that. There's a fear that by using enslaved, we're softening what happened to people. But my feeling is, and the feeling of a lot of people who are making this language kind of change, is that we can acknowledge the horrible circumstances they lived in and what was thrust upon them while still acknowledging their humanity and acknowledging that they were humans just like everyone else who had feelings and needs and, you know, as well.
Anything else to add, Kaitlyn or Sidney or Crystian?
I want to say freedom. This was actually the first time I'd heard freedom seeker. And I love that a lot.
Yeah, language matters. And that is something that I like to let kids know in talking about slavery, is our language matters. Our language matters in day-to-day life and what we say to other people, but especially in talking about slavery, we want to try and be very specific about the words that we use. So at Locust Grove, we always use enslaved person, enslaved individual, because like Heather said, this was a condition forced upon these people. This was not inherent in their being. And kids kids, whether they understand that in those terms or not, they understand that there is a difference between calling someone a slave and calling someone enslaved. There is a difference there. Calling someone a runaway, to me, cats run away. Your dog can run away. These people were not runaways. They were individuals seeking their freedom. And that was something that when I learned it, it was like getting hit with a bucket of ice cold water. It was like, oh my gosh, this is so powerful. And so terminology, it's been a shift, but it's one that has a lot of great meaning. And I think it will continue to do so.
We have an additional question from Brad. Has the Black community been part of this change of terminology? And I will just add that often the language we use, like runaways or fugitive slaves, is punitive, right? Like the Fugitive Slave Act was something that was punitive, but running away or seeking freedom is finding a way out of a punitive situation. So it's turning, it's creating a different framework for looking through that. But how do we think about engaging the Black community in changing the terminology, or how have they been part of this change in terminology kind of museum-wide?
I think it's been greatly encouraged. So I would once again point to Cheney McKnight from Not Your Mama's History. She is very open as being a Black woman. She's very open about being in support of this shift of terminology. She actually teaches it to children. She works at the New York Historical Society, and she teaches this to all of the children that she encounters as well. It's something that it's going to differ by location. It's going to differ by museum and institution. It's not going to be the same across the board. And like Heather has said, not every place has adopted this shift in terminology. So it's not something you're going to see everywhere. I think it's really up to the mission and values of each institution and entity to decide what matters to them and if this shift matters. And it's something that Locust Grove has been pretty open about for several years that it does here. But
go ahead,
or Heather, if you have other ideas on that.
Oh, I was just going to say that I personally started using that language after talking to Dr. Joy Carew, who was this head of African American Studies at the University of Louisville at the time. And I remember going to her because working with the first person interpreter program so how do we want to refer to these amazing actors who are portraying people who were enslaved at Locust Grove? Because it can get to a point where the language feels very awkward because it's this huge long phrase that you're trying to say, and it's like, so are we talking about how they portray enslaved people, or do they and her feeling was we really need to say enslaved, that they're portraying enslaved persons, because again, for her it was important to make that distinction of condition versus who the person was.
Yeah, I would just like to say I really love Carol's note in the chat that it is stemming again from the academic community, and that the Black museum community is in support and encouraging that. Again, like I said, I just learned freedom seeker for the first time, right? I think it's also important to note that African Americans also don't know a ton about slavery all the time either, right? It's a history we've tried to forget and try to let go of. So it's not even something that we are personally being educated about. There's a lot that we don't know about slavery across the board, which is why this project is so important.
I do appreciate the additional question, though, of just that curiosity of, is the Black community involved? Because without asking that, I'm not trying to put words in Brad's mouth here, but I think I understand where that might be coming from, and that in the change of language, if we are only hearing that language is being shifted from just white people, it might come across as if it is being done to help white people feel better. And so I hope that that Black people, the Black community, the Black museum community is looped into these conversations.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, thank you, Brad, for that question.
Any other questions about language or thoughts about language before we move on to a different topic? Different, but also related. Stephanie asked, Sidney, do you have any advice on starting an age-appropriate conversation with children about the topic of slavery from a museum perspective? This question was for Sidney, but our other panelists can jump in once she has directly answered it.
Awesome. And I'm actually going to share a picture about me on a school day, because that would be super fun as soon as I find it.
Because why not?
Because why not? But I actually think that Kaitlyn answered this question quite beautifully when she was speaking. And that I think it has everything to do with, gauging whether, that child is ready for that conversation, right? Asking them what they know and building upon it. I think that's the best thing to do. And I try to kind of stick to make it as simple as possible, right? I use terms like, when I'm interpreting, I use my life is not my own, right? I don't own anything. I'm not able to do anything without permission from these other people, right? I am essentially their property. I think when a child is ready, right, you go into the thing that I think deepens that is the layer of, we were taken from our home in another continent against our will and brought here to work. And I think once you add that layer in, that's really the foundation of it, right? But again, gauging that child's readiness for that information, and then really yourself being ready to answer all the whys, because that's what kids do. They ask why. So preparing yourself for that conversation is probably more important than Lord, the questions that they're going to ask. Like, you just have to be ready. Them being ready, you got to be ready. That's what I was trying to get out.
Yeah.
Oh, my picture. Lord, hold on.
We want to see.
My bad. My thing, and I got distracted, as I do. Let's see. My picture that I wanted to share was right here. Here we go. It was a school day. So this is me in my rose scarf, right? This is after I got my scarf as rose. We had a lot of kiddos come through. I think it probably was like right before Christmas. This is either Christmas tide or right before Christmas. I can't remember.
We only make candied peel at Christmas tide, so.
There you go. And that's me and Xavier talking to the kids too. Oh, that's me in the house during the funeral. The funeral was, there we go.
I'm sorry you guys missed George Rogers Clark's bicentennial of his funeral. It was a really incredible day. Yeah, this is a lot of kids with Sidney.
Yes, it's one of my favorite parts, and that's me and Michael Twitty. And Brian, there's Brian. So yeah, the kids are my favorite part.
I think that was at the end of, if you can find Bizarre Foods online, I think it streams on Hulu.
Yeah, or if you have Spectrum, it's like season 8.
It's season 8, and it's the Kentucky episode. I can only show 30-second clips of it legally, so go forth and find Sidney. It had a great day. Other questions about speaking with school children or even the public about slavery?
I was just going to add something that Sidney is, she talks about she loves talking to children. It's very evident in watching her interpret. And one of my hands down favorite interpretive moments across all the programs ever that I've been a part of at Locust Grove was the first year, I want to say, that she interpreted Rose in the kitchen during Christmas tide. And this is a great example of, I think sometimes we underestimate kids and what they're taking in and what they understand, first of all. They get a lot from context. And Sidney and X were in the hearth kitchen, and it actually gotten really dark, because I actually have a picture of this, but it's so horribly noisy because it was so dark in there. So it was toward the end of the night, and she and X were kind of talking about their day. And there's this moment when this little girl, who I want to say was maybe 10, where she finally connected the dots that Rose couldn't leave, that Rose couldn't just go to bed because she was tired, or, that she couldn't go to the party. There was just this moment where you could tell that it clicked in her head, and she got really quiet, and she looked right at Sidney, and she was like, "You mean you can't leave if you don't want to?" And her mother got very uncomfortable, and I think she was worried about making Sidney uncomfortable. But what Sidney did that was so beautiful was she shut out the entire room. She turned her chair sideways, she leaned down and got it eye level, and they had a whole conversation, just the two of them, back and forth, very quietly, with Sidney kind of explaining, "No, I can't go, and this is why." And it was very powerful. And like I said, I think that's one of those where it would be easy to underestimate a child understanding what's going on. And kids are smart, and they observe things, and they see things, and they figure things out. And so I think it's not even so much of how do you bring up the topic, it's just how do you guide them through that conversation more than anything else.
And I think also being prepared for the emotions that come with it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Crystian, you had something to add?
Oh, I think I was just going to say that I want to say for the Unfolding the Story show, I believe, Kaitlyn, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that we are setting the age for children to be 10 years old. But also, I think the general rule is that we can all live by is that you know your child better than we do. And so if you believe that your child can handle the subject matter, then yeah,
bring them.
Trust
so we set the age as a recommendation because there are some pretty tough topics covered in this experience, and it's meant to be a first-hand account, so it's delivered in that type of manner. So we suggest ages 10 and up, but again, like Crystian said, you know your kids, you know the conversation that you're going to have with your kids. And we want this to be something that spurs reflection and spurs connectivity. So, we won't turn anyone away. I also wanted to add, we're working on other tangible ways to have these conversations with kids. So in the enslaved family dwelling, we're going to have a lot of touchable things, gourds and crockery and skillets and baskets. We want things that we can let kids touch, because that's another big part of learning for kids is experiencing in a tactile way. So it's not easy. The conversations are not easy, but like Heather has said, like Sidney has said, they can be transformative, and being the site where those things click in students' brains, that's something we are so privileged to do, and we're honored to try and do that in an appropriate manner. So that was such a great question. I'm thankful.
That dovetails quite nicely with our next question from Sarah Rose. I can imagine that it might be quite emotionally taxing for a Black interpreter to portray an enslaved person at a site like this. So for Sidney and Crystian, if you don't mind sharing, what kind of support do you find helpful from the public, your colleagues, or the institution, Locust Grove?
Sure. Go ahead, Crystian.
Oh, okay. First thing is asking what is the subject matter itself first. I think in my experience so far with the Unfolding the Story script, I just added this portion into my intro that I do in every performance, stating that this show, if you were expecting depictions of Black trauma and things of that nature, or what might come into your mind when you think about slavery, because of what we've all experienced on film and television over the years, then that is not what you're going to see. While yes, there may be some moments that still make you uncomfortable, that make you think about what it was like for an enslaved individual, the interpreters themselves will never have to put themselves in a position to deliver a speech or do something physically that is demeaning to them as people and to the enslaved people as well, the characters that they're playing. So first thing is, what is the subject matter? as you know, the director of this whole show, it's an honor that I take very seriously, to make sure that there is a balance of doing this type of work in a dignified way while still highlighting the fact that I love what Heather said earlier about the house itself being the biggest artifact that we have for the enslaved people, that it's not the Croghan house. It's actually the oldest artifact that we have on the site of the enslaved individuals there. There's just a balance of, you don't have to depict Black trauma in order to show that it was a very traumatic time for Black people, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, and I love that that was never the intention of the program ever, right? And I never got that vibe coming in. I think the best support that I had was from Locust Grove staff and volunteers, who are just so welcoming and warm. And I remember, I think the thing that really was like, okay, especially as a boots on the ground person, is just getting that permission to have my own agency, even though I'm acting, right? At any point, if I am uncomfortable, I am allowed to stop and say, hey, that's not cool. That's not appropriate. I don't like that. And straight up correct people if I have to, right? And here's the thing, but the beautiful thing is that's never happened. The beautiful thing is that's never happened, except for this one time. It was very subtle. Let me tell you about this. I was walking through the gift shop. Actually, I was in the lobby gift shop. An older person, I think I was like on my way to like the back, so I was like dropping character, as it were. And she said, "Oh, well, do they treat you nice here?" And I was like, "Well, I am an enslaved individual, so it really doesn't matter how I'm being treated if I have no agency over my own life, right?" And I was very transparent and very clear to tell her that, and it's as sweet and as neutral a way as I can. But I think a lot of people, especially, our older patrons, sometimes we try to neutralize the situation or make it seem like it wasn't as bad as it was by, oh, you were enslaved, but they didn't treat you bad. No trauma was happening here because I'm not seeing that in this space. So this must have been a good enslaved site. And I'm like, no, we're still enslaved. We're still enslaved. And being supported in that decision, and being supported knowing that I could do that and be supported was everything. I think another thing that helps me, obviously, it can be emotionally taxing, right? I love being able to do this with other interpreters and being able to debrief. I think one of the best traditions kind of that happens at Locust Grove is, at the end of the day or the end of interpreting, people are gathered in the hearth kitchen to eat whatever was cooked that we can't give to other people, or in the back room as we're, changing and leaving for the day, taking those moments to like be a person again and debrief about what happened and being able to voice anything, that's what does it for me.
One thing we also did institutionally, and then we have a research question, is our interpreters of the enslaved always have a support person. So for a long time, it was Joy Carew. Any space where Sidney was interpreting in first person, Dr. Joy Carew was her support person to provide third person context. Crystian is a support person for all of his actors, all of our actors with the unfolding of story. So it is our intention that they have the ability to drop character should they need it, if they're in a situation that could prove unsafe, but they're also literally never alone in a space unless they ask to be, or unless someone steps out for a minute. So that's something we did institutionally, was make sure that our actors were supported both with an actual presence and in the other ways that Sidney and Crystian described.
Right.
So that has worked for us as well, and continues to work as Crystian continues to provide support for his actors. So this is from Tegan Sorensen, who, if I'm not mistaken, is with Mammoth Cave. So often an obstacle I find in talking about the stories of enslaved people at Mammoth Cave is the loss of their records and almost any firsthand accounts. Yes. Can you all talk more about the process of creating a composite character, so a character who may have the name of an enslaved person, an actual enslaved person about whom biography we don't know, And any tips for a white tour guide, any tips for respectfully and impactfully telling those stories?
I can answer that, but first I want to tag on real quick to the end of the last question, where you were talking about always having someone with interpreters of the enslaved, and that's actually one of my favorite things to do is to sit in the kitchen at Christmastide, and I may not get to do that this year, which makes me kind of sad because I love sitting there watching those interpreters kind of do their thing, but also to kind of talk about some things that we're still working on, because I don't want people to think that we have perfected this process yet. We are still learning a lot. And I can say from working with the white interpreters that they are very protective of people who are portraying enslaved individuals, in the sense that they don't want them to have a traumatic experience, right? And to the point that it can make those interpreters very uncomfortable, because they never want to feel like they are being hurtful or offensive to their fellow interpreters that they are working with. And that's one of the things that this year, we're going to continue to really give some really good concrete guidance and work through that with our interpreters as well, so that both sides have that support. And again, and white interpreters are also, that's one of the very rare instances where they are allowed to step out of character. Again, is if it is dealing with slavery and they feel like this is going sideways and they need to make a correction, that they are more than welcome to step out of character and have that conversation, because we really want to make sure that everybody's in a safe emotional space for doing that. So composite characters and researching and presenting people that you don't know a lot about. So as far as taking a composite character, like we were talking about Louisa, and Louisa is someone who I am currently actively researching with the feelings that I will find more about her. I suspect there's information out there about her. I just have to find it. But we don't have a lot about her. We know who her children were. We finally figured out who the father of her children were. That's a recent development. But we do know that her age, we know that she and one of her children contracted scrofula at one point, and that's based on a physical description from her emancipation records. And so that we know, for those of you who don't know, scrofula is a form of tuberculosis that causes abscesses in your neck and chest. And so she had scars, and one of her children had scars from scrofula. Don't Google it if you don't like gross pictures. It's really graphic, but we don't know a lot about her, except that she had survived this illness, that she had children, that she lived at Locust Grove. So what we can take is, details we know about other enslaved women who lived at Locust Grove, or what kinds of duties, what kinds of jobs would she have been assigned at Locust Grove? What did her children go on to do? Does that reflect on her as a mother and what her relationships were with her children? And then just the broader perspective of what was life like for an enslaved woman on a mid-sized farm in Kentucky. And so when we're building a character that's a living, breathing person that's going to interact, we have to pull from all that knowledge to kind of form who that person is. Now, like Alfred Croghan, the other person in this tour, we have a lot more on Alfred. Alfred is very near and dear to my heart. He's one of my favorite people I have researched, and it's one of those where I've actually talked with Chuck DeCroy at Mammoth Cave several times about Alfred, and he has shared information he's had, which has kind of allowed me to follow some leads. And we now have Alfred from being a child born at Locust Grove all the way to his obituary when he dies as a free man in Louisville in the 1860s. And so for him, he was much easier to talk about, just because, I know that he liked to sing certain songs on cave tours. I know that Alfred was literate, based on, some accounts of what Alfred's life was like. I know that Alfred, much like Rose, who Sidney was attracted to as a person portrayed, showed a sense of agency at times, of little ways that he could take control of his life, small stands that he might be able to take to control his life. And so, I try to talk about those things. And again, it's not just what function did he serve for the Croghans, but who was he as a person? What was his life been like? What would his worries and cares have been, Those are the things that I try to share. It's hard when you don't have their words. And so quickly, because I don't want to talk too long about this, but sometimes you can use contextual clues. Another enslaved person that people at Locust Grove know is very near and dear to me. It was a woman named Sylvia Davis. And Sylvia was born at Locust Grove. And we had mentions of Sylvie and Sylvia and Silva in letters. And there was a lot of, it took me a lot back and forth to say that, yes, these are all the same person. And sometimes they aren't, like there are two men named Alfred, but in this case, I'm pretty confident Sylvia, this is all the same woman. And one of the few references we have to her is a letter from Dr. Croghan in later years, like in the 1830s, where he's writing a letter and he's saying that he cannot lease Sylvia out because she is too fond of whiskey and will be dead in a year. So he is afraid that if he leases Sylvia to someone else who won't keep an eye on her, that she will drink herself to death. And again, it kind of almost comes across as this drunk, lazy problem child, right? That's kind of how she's described. But then let's go back and look at the letter, the other references we have about her. And we realize that, you know, the Croghan family, and this was very common, passed enslaved people around the family from one person to the next, to the next, to the next. So who was overseeing your daily life changed. And there's a lot of uncertainty that comes with that. Sylvia was attached to 5 different members of the Croghan family. Even if she never left Louisville and even if she never left Locust Grove, that's a lot of uncertainty and feeling out of control in her life. And then we also know that during the 1832 cholera epidemic that hit Louisville, she lost 3 children in 24 hours to the cholera epidemic. And as a parent, I cannot imagine. I cannot imagine losing 3 of your children. And in the letter, it's like this offhand thing of, oh, we're all doing fine. We didn't lose anybody except, you know, 3 children of Sylvia's. And it's kind of very harsh and cut and dry the way it's expressed. And all I can think about is this woman and the trauma that she experienced as a mother of losing her children. And so then you get to the future a few years later and they're like, well, Sylvia's drinking too much. And it's like, well, look at what she has experienced during her lifetime. Of course, she has found some way to try to cope with this situation that she is in. And so that's sometimes also how we can piece those stories together. And I can happily say, based on more recent research, that Sylvia did live to get her freedom, and that she, in her later years, lived with a daughter and a granddaughter. So she was able to maintain those family relationships post-emancipation. But that's kind of how, when I'm researching, it's like, okay, let's see if we can look through the one little line of information and look and connect that to what we know what's going on and see at least a little glimpse of the whole person in there. I don't know if that's helpful or not, but.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Sidney, you did create a composite character, Rose. If you have anything else to add on that topic.
Sure.
And Crystian, you've had a little bit of experience with this as we've pulled in different biographical things for unfolding. So feel free to comment.
Awesome. I'll jump in. I've got to leave out in a little while to go teach.
Yes, we are winding down. We have 8 minutes left.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, I'll say that the character that I built, Rose, did not have as much information as Sylvia. Sylvia would be an amazing person to interpret. Again, it comes to that. It really comes down to actor work at that point. And the thing I think that most people dismiss about an actor's work, right? If you're doing it well, it does require research. It requires research into the time period. It requires research into the things, again, that those people would have been doing in that place at that time. And then it turns into using your imagination. Acting work is imagination work, to create something that is as realistic and as close to what we believe it would have been at that time. And so I like to tie things to senses, you know, what are the smells that are happening? What are the things that I'm feeling in my environment? What are the things that I'm seeing, right? Imagining conversations with people, imagining my relationships with other people, and kind of letting everything that I say come from these things that I've created.
Absolutely.
And I would just, sure. For the unfolding story with Alfred, we were looking for a way to add a bit more drama, if you will, to his section of the story, because it's a shorter time that you will have with Alfred than Louisa, because he is just taking you on a tour of the outbuildings and the distillery. So his portion ends pretty quickly. So I wanted to find a way to sort of make his time on the tour just a bit more impactful. And so I just went into the research that has been done already on Alfred, and I found that he was married and had a child. And so I added a bit of text into the script that is just Alfred talking to the people on the tour and saying, I'm married and I have a kid on the way. And he asked the audience, do y'all have any children? Like, he's really excited. But he also acknowledges that it's not going to be easy because of the conditions that he's in, but they're going to do their best, you know. Just little bits of, you know, factual research like that are just, they do wonders. And it's just a really nice moment in the show. And then in regards to the other question about, you know, being a white tour guide and ways to, you know, tell these stories, I can't necessarily give you too much advice, but I mean, I guess I can only say respect and collaboration, because that's what I've experienced in Locust Grove so far. This is obviously a mostly white staff, right? But I think their mission has, since I've been here, and I know Sidney feels this way, is that they want to find ways to respectfully tell the stories of the enslaved. And they know that if we're going to do it respectfully, we have to collaborate with people of color in order to do that. So I would just say respect and collaboration.
Absolutely. It is daunting to talk about the enslaved as a white tour guide, but being able to talk to our interpreters, Crystian and Sidney and Lamar and Brandy, and collaborate has made for a better experience for our guests and a better conversation that we have. We're always at Locust Grove, we are trying to be really comfortable with being uncomfortable so that we can have conversations that are important and, as Crystian said, impactful. We do have one final question. If anyone has any quick questions, let me know. But I did have a question from Dana Gagnon. What are we doing to share this research in a printed form with our audience? So I am going to answer this because I am in charge of printed materials, and then I will let our panelists add in some other thoughts. We recently completed a guidebook that has an extensive section on the enslaved at Locust Grove. You can see it, there it is. And so it has our most up-to-date research on the enslaved at Locust Grove, but we are also in the process of creating a booklet based on Heather's research. And then Kaitlyn mentioned that we have put profiles of enslaved individuals on our social media for the last little bit of time, I think about the last year, if I'm remembering correctly. So we do have plans to make all of those profiles into a book once we have completed the 70 individuals that we know of. We also hope to include some of the information that Crystian has talked about in unfolding the story, that Sidney has talked about. So we might include some information about, so you're going to be interacting with a person portraying an enslaved person today. Did I freeze?
For a little bit back.
I froze for a little bit.
Come back, Hannah.
Hello, I'm here. I just got the notification that my internet connection is unstable. So that's what happened. But anyway, we are going to be, Carol noted that we see it as an ever expanding project, perhaps better suited to the internet than print, but print is great too. So we're gonna start with something in print. Maybe it will be a binder that kind of, did anyone ever have trading card binders where you just kept adding pages? It's gonna be like that. We want to be able to visibly expand our knowledge.
Yeah, I would also say, if you're not already a member of Locust Grove, please consider becoming a member. We put out quarterly newsletters called the Grove Gazette, and I know something that will be coming out in the spring story list for the Gazette is actually a lot of information about the new research on the enslaved here at Locust Grove, on the Unfolding the Story project. And in almost every issue, we touch on the new initiatives and new research that we are doing. So that's a great way to stay in touch with what's going on here. And we love to have new members. You get so many great perks. You get so much great information. And it's a great way to stay in touch with what we've got going on.
I will put information about membership in your follow-up email that will come to you sometime between now and this time tomorrow. It's a surprise. Any final questions in the chat? As Carol said, I just want to reiterate, we do see this as an ever-expanding project. This is not something that it's something that definitely has a beginning point. October 4th, 1964, when Locust Grove opened as a museum, and it's just going to continue. So we appreciate your feedback. We appreciate your support. We appreciate your visits to Locust Grove. We appreciate your questions. And we also appreciate the work of Heather Hiner, Kaitlyn Tisdale, Sidney Edwards, and Crystian Wiltshire. Any final words, panelists?
Thank you all for coming.
Thank you, everyone.
We're so pleased that you could join us. I think that is all for today. Please stay tuned to your email, to Locust Grove's website, to our social media. And our next program, our next living room lecture is on April 28th. April 28th, it will feature Brigitte Fielder from the University of Wisconsin-Madison speaking about Audubon, birds, the enslaved, and the imagery of freedom. So please join us for that program, April 28th at 1 p.m. But we're so grateful to have all of you today. That took me